But I felt, now looking back, I know that Jesus was with me. And he bore that shame with me and the pain. He says that in all our affliction, he is afflicted. I went back home and didn't tell anyone again, but nothing was dealt with. The roots only went deeper. I would go to parties and drink, trying to look after my children, trying to be a good mother, trying to get my university degree, trying to be a good Jewish girl, and knowing that I wasn't good. And eventually came to a place where I met a young Japanese man. I was living in a very nice home and I had a room for rent. And he came to knock on my door, asking if I had any place for him, a room to rent in a Canadian family. He wanted to learn English and be here. You know, in Judaism, we're taught to be kind to the strangers and to be good to the foreigners, especially because we were slaves in Egypt. We're supposed to, so, you know, I say, but I took that a little too far. And we fell in love and we decided we were going to live happily ever after. And of course, this included having a baby together. You know, I still had this compulsion to get pregnant again. I know it sounds unbelievable, but this was driving me. We went out, we prayed one night to the stars that we would have a beautiful baby. And I became pregnant again. And when he called back to Japan to tell his parents the good news, they were horrified. And they said, she must have an abortion. She must have an abortion. And they phoned day and night, day and night, day and night, constantly at him. She must have an abortion. They offered to fly me to Tokyo free for the abortion, even up to the very last month, up to 9 months. They were still pressuring me that they will fly me to Tokyo to have this abortion at 9 months. Thank God by this time I had come into contact with a pregnancy care center in Canada. And I went in there because even though the father of my baby had promised to love us and stay with us and look after us and support us, eventually under the pressure he agreed with his parents to go back to Japan. And the night before he was to go, I was terrified of him leaving. I said, how can you leave me pregnant and go back to Japan? We did this together. You promised, we planned this. You promised to stay with. You know, I had such a fear of abandonment. And he took my hand and he said, Hannah, you know me. You know my heart. You know how I love you. I could never abandon you, the woman that I love and our child. And he said, don't ever think to kill the baby, because this is a precious gift from God to us. And he said, I will be back, I promise you. And he left on the morning, it was my birthday, and he left. I said goodbye, and I didn't hear from him. And I kept phoning and phoning to Japan, and all I'd hear on the other end of the phone was this voice, hysterical woman's voice saying, no baby, no baby, no baby. And I couldn't reach him. I was hysterical. I went into shock. Eventually he phoned, and he had no emotion in his voice. He said, my parents are right. Either you have an abortion, or I will never come back. I will never help you. You will never hear from me again. And I hung up the phone, and I went into this shock, and I called my parents, and they couldn't even understand what I was saying. They just knew something was wrong. I was in trouble. Somebody picked me up, drove me to their place, and all I could do was cry and cry and cry and cry for days. People just sat by my bed, and I just cried and screamed. I said, he has to come back, he has to come back. I will kill myself if he doesn't come back. I can't be here alone and pregnant. And you see, my foundation was based on men. on man. It was not on the rock. It wasn't on anything that couldn't go away. And I needed a solid foundation. And that's what I didn't have. It was on somebody that could be here today and gone tomorrow. And I went to a crisis pregnancy center. I didn't know it was Christian, or I wouldn't have gone. I'm a nice Jewish girl, don't forget. So I went, and my counselor talked to me, and all I know was that I felt such love pouring out of her. This love was pouring out of her eyes. It was radiating out of her eyes, and I had never felt such love. She told me later that when I came in, and I was like an educated, well-dressed Jewish woman, she had no idea what to say to me. She was like intimidated, and she ran to the front desk, grabbed the hand of the receptionist and said, "You've got to pray with me." And she said, but also she felt a terrible heaviness. I think it was from all the occult and from the spirit of death from the abortions. She felt a terrible darkness and heaviness that was over me. She grasped hands with this woman at the desk, the receptionist. Quickly they prayed. She went back into the room, and the Lord led her to show me a video called The Morning After. Morning as in Mourning. And it was on this video I saw a woman who had had multiple abortions as I had. And I thought nobody else had more than at least, nobody else would make the same stupid mistake more than once. I must be the only one. But here was a woman, nice woman, beautiful woman, and she had had multiple abortions, and she could not maintain a relationship. And she was running away, and that was what I was always doing. I was always just running away, anywhere I could run, anywhere, run away from this, and there was nowhere to run. She was on the highway hitchhiking. She was just going to run. And it gave her testimony, and how she found peace, and how she found healing. And it just gave me hope. It just gave me some sort of hope. And in the end, my counselor, Brenda, she said, "I don't know how to say this to you, but I believe this is a divine appointment." I said, "Good." I didn't know what a divine appointment was. Great. Then she gave me a little book. She said, "I want to give this to you as a gift." I said, "Okay." It was a New Testament, but it also had the Psalms and the Proverbs in it. Well, I'm polite. I'm Canadian. So I just accepted it. Thank you very much. I thought I'd never read this. I mean, for goodness sake, the New Testament's for the Goyim. It's for the Gentiles. But maybe I could read the Psalms and the Proverbs. I actually had never read through the Bible before. I just knew all the Old Testament stories, but I'd never actually read the Bible. So when I had this terrible crisis when he abandoned me, and I was sitting in shock at my parents' place, suicidal, and I just sat there, I held this book, and I just fingered this book, and I started to open it, I started to read it. I started to read the Psalms of David, and I started to read this person, I didn't know who it was, who went through such betrayal, such abandonment. He said his closest friend betrayed him, and his grief, his sorrow. "Why are you so downcast? Oh, my soul, put your hope in God." He said, "All men are liars." And I thought, yes! I had such a hatred towards men. But he kept saying, "Hope in God, trust in God." I thought, how do I do this? And I just kept reading it and reading it and reading it. The day that my boyfriend had promised to be back by New Year's, it was New Year's Eve, a parcel came in the mail. It was a beautiful journal where he had put in his picture, and he said, "Hannah, I love you very, very much. I want to come back and to marry you and live with you, and we'll have a very happy life together. But it's not good for us to have this baby right now. It would be too hard for us and too much responsibility. Please have an abortion, and I will come back to you." I cried and I cried and I cried. I didn't know what to do. And a long time before, I had cut out a little phone number from the newspaper that was a care line, 24-hour crisis line, because I knew I was constantly in crisis. I thought maybe one day I'll need to call this. I called this line, and somebody listened to me, and I was just crying and crying. And they said, "Can I pray with you?" They prayed with me. Then they said, "Repeat after me." I said, "Okay." I would have said anything. And I prayed the sinner's prayer to receive the Lord. I didn't know what I was doing. After a while, later, I I asked the Lord, I didn't know what I was doing. Was this really, legitimate? He said, God said, don't worry, I had to bring you in the back door, because you're Jewish. You didn't think you could have actually come to Jesus. So he brought me in this way. And eventually I started to read the Bible, learn about my faith, and learned that actually Jesus is Jewish too. And it's totally kosher for a Jewish person to believe in a Jewish Messiah. And I started to become involved. They took me into the church. They loved me. And eventually began a process of healing my broken heart. He said he came to heal the brokenhearted and bind up the wounds, to give beauty for ashes. And my life was just a big ash heap. I was sitting weeping on my ash heap. And over a period of time, he's brought back life. He's brought back joy. It was that God that sent an angel to me, I believe, to tell me about Jesus, to save my life and to save the life of my son. Because after my boyfriend left me and I was suicidal, one night I found myself in a hotel. I was having dinner, and a friend of mine, a doctor friend of mine, was there with us. And he said, Hannah, enough of this. You must go and have an abortion. And I was so upset by this time. I ran into the bathroom of this hotel. I shut the door, and I just got down on my knees in there, and I just said, God, help me. Help me. I don't know what to do. And I heard the door open, and a woman came in. Well, I hoped it was a woman. I was in a woman's bathroom. But the door opened, and I heard a voice say to me, a soft voice say, can I help you? And for some reason, I just poured out my story of how I was pregnant and I was abandoned by the father of the baby, and everybody's saying I have to have an abortion and I don't want to, I don't know what to do. And this woman said, I don't know if you're going to believe this, she said, but 20 years ago, the very same thing happened to me. I was pregnant and I was abandoned by the father of the baby. And she says, I want to tell you something. She said, today, 20 years later, my son is a big, strong, handsome young man, and he is on the football team. And I have married a wonderful man. He loves all of our children. And I want to tell you something. You can have this baby. God will give you the strength to have this baby. And I just took in those words of life that she spoke to me. And then there was a pause, and then she said, I still couldn't see her. And so she didn't know I'm a Jewish girl, so she shared with me. She said, I don't want to push anything on you. She said, but I want to tell you that I am a Christian, and I want you to know that Jesus loves you, and he will never leave you and never forsake you. And this is the solid rock. This is the foundation that I needed to know, that there is someone, not a cosmic force, not some karmic thing, but there was someone who knew me, who knew everything I had been through, everything I would go through, and who would never, never leave me, and whose help I could always count on. And that's what he has been to me. That's what he has become to me. She asked me if I would come out and give her a hug. So I came out, I hugged her, she hugged me for a long time. Then she let me go, and then I turned around and she was just gone. I never saw the door open. I never saw her leave. She was gone. And I like to believe to this day that God sent an angel to save us. The church took me in. They loved me. They helped me. They prayed for me. In June 24th of 1993, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, born at home with a midwife and with my friends, my sisters in the Lord from the church, praying for me and for him. And I now have a beautiful, beautiful boy. He's 11 years old right now. His name is Timothy. And he is a really special guy. And you can see he's wearing this bracelet around his wrist that says, what does it say?
Life.
It says life. And just last night he asked me, Mom, will you pray for me